Commander Velnara stared at the holographic display floating above her command console. Red markers covered the star map like a spreading disease. Each red dot represented a world lost to the Vraltic swarm. In 3 cycles, the Galactic Coalition had lost more territory than in the previous 100 years combined. She touched one of the markers with her long blue-gray fingers. Colony 7 Gamma. 15 million souls. Gone in 4 hours. The Vraltics didn't take prisoners. They consumed everything organic and moved on like locusts across space. "Commander!" a voice called from behind her. Fleet Admiral Torvan entered the bridge, his 6 legs clicking against the metal floor. The Admiral was Kreth, a species that resembled large arthropods from Earth, though Velnara had never heard of Earth until recently. "The Council has made their decision." Velnara turned to face him. As a Taheen, she stood nearly 7 feet tall with hardened skin plates that could stop most small arms fire. Her people were warriors, bred for combat over thousands of generations. Fear was genetically removed from her species during the Great Enhancement. She had never felt fear in her 40 years of military service. She had felt pain, anger, even sadness, but never fear. "They're accepting Earth's petition?" she asked. "Yes, the humans will join the war effort." Torvan's mandibles clicked together in what might have been concern. "I know you have reservations." Reservations was putting it mildly. Velnara had read the human files. They were a Class 3 species, barely spacefaring, with moderate technology and average physical capabilities. Their homeworld was listed as hazardous in the database, but that meant little. Many species came from difficult environments. "They'll be cannon fodder," Velnara said bluntly. "We're desperate enough to accept anyone who can hold a weapon." "Perhaps, but the Council wants integration protocols established immediately. You're assigned as liaison officer to the human contingent. They're arriving in 6 hours. Velnara's spine stiffened. Liaison duty was beneath her rank, but she couldn't refuse a direct assignment. "Understood, Admiral." 6 hours later, she stood in the docking bay of the Coalition flagship, the Harmonious Unity. The bay could hold vessels the size of small cities, and right now it felt very empty except for the single human ship gliding through the atmospheric barrier. The ship was called the Indomitable, according to her datapad. It was sleek compared to Coalition vessels, built for speed rather than heavy armor. Weapons bristled from its hull, far more than standard for a ship its size. Humans apparently liked guns. The Indomitable settled onto the deck with a hiss of hydraulics. A boarding ramp extended from its side. Velnara waited, her posture perfect, her face neutral. The first human to emerge was tall for his species, perhaps 6 feet. He wore a dark blue uniform with silver insignia on his shoulders. His hair was black and cut short, his eyes dark and alert. He walked down the ramp with confidence, followed by several other humans. "Commander Velnara?" the human asked, stopping a respectful distance away. His voice was deeper than she expected. "I'm Captain Park Hyun-sik of the UNSC Indomitable. It's an honor to serve with the Coalition." Velnara studied him carefully. He looked fragile compared to her people. Soft skin, no natural armor, no visible weapons on his body. His muscles were dense for his size, but he probably couldn't lift half what she could. How were these creatures supposed to fight the Vraltics? "Captain Park," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "Welcome to the Harmonious Unity. I've been assigned to facilitate your integration into Coalition forces." "We appreciate that." Hyun-sik gestured to the humans behind him. "This is my senior staff. Lieutenant Kim Dae-jung, my pilot. Lieutenant Choi Yuna, weapons officer. And Corporal Lee Hana, our chief medic." Velnara's eyes moved across them. The pilot was shorter and stocky with quick, nervous energy. The weapons officer was a female, lean and sharp-eyed. The medic was young, with gentle features that seemed completely wrong for a war zone. "Your crew is small," Velnara observed. "The Indomitable carried only 200 personnel according to her data. Coalition ships this size usually held 500. "We prefer flexibility over numbers," Hyun-sik said. "Quality over quantity." Velnara didn't respond to that. She'd heard similar philosophies before from species that didn't last long in real combat. "I'll show you to your quarters. The Admiral wants to brief all commanding officers in 4 hours. I suggest you rest." "With respect, Commander, we didn't come here to rest." Hyun-sik's expression remained polite, but something shifted in his eyes. Something hard. "When's the next combat deployment?" "Eager to die?" The words came out sharper than Velnara intended. The human didn't seem offended. Instead, he smiled slightly. "Eager to fight. There's a difference." Before Velnara could respond, an alarm blared across the docking bay. Red lights began rotating. The ship's AI spoke in clear tones. "Alert! Priority distress signal received. Colony Theta-7 under attack. Vraltic's forces confirmed. Estimated civilian population, 40,000. Velnara's datapad lit up with tactical information. Her eyes scanned the data quickly. Theta-7 was a mining colony, lightly defended. The Vraltics had deployed 3 assault carriers. The colony's shields would last maybe 6 hours. "How far?" Hyun-sik asked, reading over her shoulder without permission. 4 hours at maximum slipspace velocity, Velnara said. "But by the time we arrive, they'll still be fighting." Hyun-sik turned to his crew. "Get the Indomitable ready for immediate departure. Full combat loadout. I want every Marine suited up and every weapon hot." His crew moved instantly, running back toward their ship without a single word of confirmation needed. Velnara watched them go, then looked at the human captain. "You haven't even been briefed on coalition protocols," she said. "You don't know our tactical formations or communication systems." "Then you'll teach us on the way." Hyun-sik met her eyes directly. In coalition culture, such direct eye contact was challenging behavior. Humans apparently didn't care about such things. "Commander, 40,000 people are about to die. We can either stand here talking about procedures, or we can go help them. Your choice." Velnara felt something strange in her chest. Not fear. She couldn't feel fear. But something close to uncertainty? She'd fought dozens of battles, always following proper protocol, always maintaining acceptable casualty ratios, always retreating when the mathematics demanded it. This human talked like mathematics didn't matter. "I'll inform the Admiral," she said finally. "And I'm coming with you. Someone needs to make sure you don't violate every military regulation we have." Hyun-sik's smile widened. "Fair enough. Welcome aboard, Commander." As Velnara followed the humans onto their ship, she reviewed the tactical data one more time. 40,000 civilians, 3 Vraltics assault carriers. Response time, 4 hours. By any reasonable calculation, they'd arrive just in time to find corpses and empty buildings. But Captain Park Hyun-sik didn't seem to care about reasonable calculations. The Indomitable's engines roared to life, and Velnara strapped herself into a seat in the human ship's bridge. Around her, the crew moved with practiced efficiency, calling out status reports in their strange language that her translator Chip barely kept up with. "All stations ready," Yuna reported from the weapons console. "Course plotted," Daejung added from the pilot's seat. Hyun-sik sat in the command chair, his face calm. "Then let's go to war. Maximum speed." The Indomitable shot forward into the darkness of space, carrying Velnara towards something she didn't yet understand. She was about to witness humans in battle for the first time. She had no idea what she was about to see. The journey to Theta-7 took exactly 3 hours and 42 minutes. Velnara spent most of that time on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the human crew prepare for battle. They moved differently than coalition forces. There was less talking, more efficiency. They checked weapons twice, then checked them again. Dropping out of slip space in 30 seconds, Dae-jung announced. Velnara gripped her seat restraints. The transition from faster-than-light travel always made her stomach twist, even after years of space combat. The view screen flickered, and suddenly they were in normal space. Theta 7 hung before them, a brown and gray mining world with minimal atmosphere. 3 massive Viraltix bioships orbited the planet, each one the size of a small mountain. They were organic vessels, grown rather than built, covered in chitinous armor and pulsing with sickly green light. Drop pods fell from their bellies like seeds, carrying warriors to the surface. "Scanning," Yuna said from her console. "Colony shields at 37% and falling. Detecting massive ground forces. Command center is under direct assault." "How many civilians evacuated?" Hyun-sik asked. "None. The colony doesn't have enough transport ships." Velnara checked her own tactical display. The numbers were clear. By the time coalition reinforcements arrived, the colony would be overrun. Standard protocol was simple. Save who you can, preserve your forces, accept the loss. "Captain," she said carefully, "we should request additional ships before engaging. 1 frigate against 3 assault carriers is suicide," Hyun-sik finished. "Yes, probably. Dae-jung, take us in. Yuna, target the nearest carrier's drop bays. I want those pods stopped." The indomitable dove toward the planet. Plasma fire erupted from the Viraltix ships, streaking through space like angry red lines. Dae-jung twisted the ship through the barrage with skill that impressed even Velnara. The hull shuddered as a few shots connected, but the shields held. Yuna's fingers danced across her console. "Firing!" Missiles launched from the Indomitable's hull, dozens of them, each seeking a different target. They slammed into the nearest bioship's underbelly. Explosions bloomed in silence across the vacuum. Drop pods tumbled away, spinning uselessly into space. "Good hits," Yuna reported. "But the other 2 carriers are still deploying." "Can't save everyone," Hyun-sik said quietly. "But we can save some. Get us to the surface. I want Marines deployed to the command center within 5 minutes. Velnara activated her communication link. "Captain, I must protest. Ground deployment without proper support is—" "Noted, Commander. Your protest is officially logged." Hyun-sik stood from his chair. "Now, if you're coming with us, I suggest you suit up. The Viraltix don't wait for proper procedures." 10 minutes later, Velnara stood in the drop bay wearing borrowed human armor. It fit poorly on her larger frame, but the humans had modified it quickly. Around her, 30 human Marines checked their weapons one final time. They were led by Sergeant Kwon Tae-yang, a short, muscular man with scars on his face and calm eyes. "Listen up," Tae-yang said, his voice carrying through the bay. "We're dropping right into hell. The command center is surrounded. Our job is to break through, evacuate whoever we can, and hold the line until evacuation is complete. Expected enemy numbers are approximately 300 combatants." 300. 30 Marines. Velnara did the math automatically. 10-to-1 odds. Impossible. "Any questions?" Tae-yang asked. A young woman raised her hand. Corporal Song Ji-hai, according to Velnara's helmet display. "Sergeant, what's our acceptable casualty ratio for this mission?" Tae-yang's expression didn't change. "We don't have acceptable casualties, Corporal. We have necessary ones. Stay alive if you can. Complete the mission regardless. Clear?" "Clear, Sergeant." The drop bay doors opened. Wind screamed into the compartment as the Indomitable hovered 50 feet above the colony's main plaza. Velnara saw Viraltix warriors below, insect-like creatures the size of bears with blade arms and mandibles that could shear through steel. "Go, go, go!" Tae-yang shouted. The Marines dropped through the opening, rappelling down on cables. Velnara went with them, her stomach lurching as she descended. The moment her boots hit the ground, plasma fire erupted around her. A Vraltix warrior charged from her left. She drew her plasma rifle and fired, her enhanced reflexes guiding the shot. The creature's head exploded in a spray of green ichor. 2 more came behind it. Then the human marines opened fire. Velnara had seen many species fight. The Kreth used tactics and coordination. The Saltine used overwhelming firepower. The Tahine used superior physical abilities. Humans used violence. They didn't just shoot the Vraltix, they destroyed them. Bullets and plasma bolts tore through chitin armor. When a marine's weapon ran empty, they switched to another. When that ran empty, they used knives. When they lost their knives, they used their fists. A Vraltix warrior grabbed Corporal Song Ji-hai, its blade arm raised to cut her in half. She jammed her sidearm under its mandible and fired until the weapon clicked empty, then kept pulling the trigger even as green blood covered her armor. "Move forward," Tae Yang ordered. "Break through to the command center." The Marines advanced. Not tactically, not with proper covering fire and measured retreats. They simply moved forward through the enemy like a hammer through glass. Velnara found herself pulled along with them, firing at targets faster than she could think. They reached the command center's outer wall. The defensive guns were offline, and Vraltix warriors crawled over the structure like ants. Inside, Velnara could see through the windows. Dozens of civilians huddled in fear. "Breaching charges," Tae Yang ordered. But there wasn't time. More Vraltix poured into the plaza from every direction, hundreds of them. The Marines formed a defensive circle, their backs to the command center wall. "Sergeant, we need to fall back," one Marine shouted. "We're surrounded." "There's nowhere to fall back to," Tae Yang replied calmly. He reloaded his rifle with steady hands. "So we hold here." "For how long?" "Until we're dead or they are." Velnara checked her tactical display. 12 Marines were already down, 18 left. The Vraltix numbered over 200 now. By coalition standards, the acceptable casualty threshold had been exceeded. Retreat was mandatory. She opened her mouth to order withdrawal. Then she saw something that made her stop. The Marines were smiling. Not all of them, but some. They were surrounded by monsters, outnumbered 10 to 1, probably going to die, and some of them were smiling. Private Bae Sung-ho, bleeding from a gash across his ribs, actually laughed as he shot down 3 Vraltix in quick succession. "Is this normal?" Velnara asked Tae Yang. The sergeant glanced at her. "Is what normal?" "Your soldiers. They're enjoying this." Tae Yang shrugged and fired at another target. "We're not enjoying dying, Commander. We're enjoying making the bastards pay for it." The battle lasted 17 minutes. To Velnara, it felt like hours. The Marines held their ground, refusing to give even an inch. When ammunition ran low, they shared. When someone fell wounded, 2 others pulled them into the center of the circle and kept fighting. Corporal Ji-hai's right arm was broken by a Vraltix blade. She switched her weapon to her left hand and kept shooting. When that weapon was destroyed, she picked up a rifle from a fallen Marine. When that ran empty, she used it as a club. "The command center doors are opening," someone shouted. Velnara turned. The civilians inside, seeing the humans fighting to save them, had opened the defensive doors. They were dragging wounded Marines inside, away from the battle. "All personnel, fall back into the structure," Tae Yang ordered. "Fighting withdrawal, move!" The Marines retreated in pairs, one covering while the other moved. It was the first proper military tactic Velnara had seen them use all day. They reached the command center and sealed the doors behind them. Velnara did a quick head count. 18 Marines deployed. 9 standing. 4 seriously wounded but alive. 5 dead. 50% casualties. Coalition forces would have routed with those numbers. These humans were already setting up defensive positions for the next attack. "Evac ships incoming!" Daijung's voice crackled through their communications. "ETA 12 minutes. Can you hold?" Tai Yang looked at his remaining Marines. Then he smiled. "Yeah, we can hold. Send medical supplies if you got them. Velnara sat against a wall, her hands shaking slightly. Not from fear. She couldn't feel fear, but from something else. Something she didn't have a word for. She watched Corporal Hannah Lee treat the wounded, her hands gentle despite the horror around them. She watched the Marines reload their weapons and joke with each other, their voices calm. She watched humans be human. And for the first time in her life, Commander Velnara wondered if her species had removed the wrong emotion during their enhancement. Maybe fear wasn't the problem. Maybe the absence of it was. I discovered true fear, fighting alongside humans in battle. Part 3. The Indomitable's medical bay smelled like disinfectant, and something else, something organic that Velnara couldn't identify. She stood in the doorway, watching Corporal Hannah Lee work on the wounded Marines from Theta 7. "Hold still, Sung-ho," Hannah said gently, stitching a long cut across Private Bay's chest. "This is going to scar." "Good," Sung-ho replied with a grin. "Scars are proof you were too stupid to duck but too tough to die." The other wounded Marines laughed. Velnara didn't understand the humor. They'd lost 5 soldiers, and 9 more were injured. This was a disaster by any military standard. Yet here they were, joking. Hannah noticed Velnara watching. "Commander, do you need medical attention? You took some hits during the drop." "My biology handles minor trauma efficiently," Velnara said, stepping into the medical bay. "I'm fine." "Well, grab a seat anyway. You look tired." Velnara sat on an empty medical bed. She wasn't tired, not physically. The Tahine could function without rest for days, but something inside her felt heavy, worn down by questions she couldn't answer. "Can I ask you something?" Velnara said. Hannah glanced up from her work. "Of course. Why do humans fight like that? You could have retreated when casualties reached 15%. It's standard military doctrine across the entire coalition. Hannah tied off the last stitch and moved to check Corporal Ji Hai's broken arm. Because retreating meant those civilians died. Simple as that. But 5 of your people died anyway. 5 died, so 40,000 didn't have to. Hannah's hands were gentle as she set Ji Hai's arm in a stabilizing cast. That's not a bad trade. "It's inefficient," Velnara said. "Your force lost 50% combat effectiveness." Ji Hai spoke up from her bed, her voice rough with pain but clear. "Commander, with respect, we didn't join the military to be efficient. We joined to protect people. Sometimes that means dying for them." Velnara wanted to argue, but the words caught in her throat. The teen military protected their people too, but they did it through calculated risk. Acceptable losses, strategic retreats. They never threw themselves into impossible situations because they couldn't feel fear. They never learned to fight through it. Captain Hyun-sik entered the medical bay carrying a data pad. "Commander, the Admiral wants a full report on the Theta 7 operation. I told him you'd co-write it with me since you were on the ground." "Of course." Velnara stood. "Where should we work?" "My quarters. More privacy." She followed Hyun-sik through the ship's corridors. Human vessels were smaller than coalition ships, more cramped, but they felt alive somehow, with crew members constantly moving, talking, working. Coalition ships were quiet, efficient. Human ships hummed with energy. Hyun-sik's quarters were simple: a bed, a desk, a small window showing the stars beyond. Pictures covered one wall, photographs of people in various settings. Earth, Velnara assumed. "Family?" she asked, pointing at the pictures. "Some. Others are friends, old squad mates." Hyun-sik sat at his desk and activated a holographic display. "The tall woman in the middle is my sister. She's a doctor back on Earth." Velnara studied the picture. The woman looked like Hyun-sik, same dark eyes and strong features. She was smiling, standing in front of a building with a Red Cross symbol. "You must miss them," Velnara said. Every day. But they're why I'm here. Hyunsik pulled up the tactical data from Theta 7. Let's start with the initial deployment. They worked for an hour, compiling numbers and strategies. But Velnara's attention kept drifting to something else, a question that had been building since the battle. Captain, I need to understand something, she said finally. I accessed your species' files. Earth is classified as a Class 3 world, moderate threat level. But after watching your people fight, I don't believe that classification is accurate. Hyunsik leaned back in his chair. What do you think the accurate classification should be? I don't know. That's the problem. Velnara gestured at the data. Your physical abilities are average. Your technology is decent but not exceptional. Yet in combat you fight with intensity I've never seen. Your soldiers continue fighting with injuries that would incapacitate most species. They don't retreat when logic demands it. It's like you're crazy, Hyunsik suggested with a slight smile. I was going to say fearless. But that's wrong too, isn't it? I watched Corporal Song's biosigns during the battle. Her stress hormones were elevated to levels that should have caused system shutdown. Yet she kept fighting. Because she was scared, Hyunsik said quietly. But that doesn't make sense. Fear causes paralysis, hesitation, mistakes. For some species, maybe. For humans? Hyunsik shook his head. Fear is fuel. It sharpens our senses, increases our strength, makes us think faster. We evolved running from predators while simultaneously hunting other predators. Fear kept our ancestors alive long enough to reproduce. He pulled up a file on his display. Earth's history. Velnara saw images of ancient humans, primitive and savage, hunting massive beasts with simple weapons. Your species hunted animals larger than yourselves? She asked. All the time. We were persistence hunters. We didn't outrun our prey. We outlasted them. We'd chase an animal for days, tracking it, never giving it rest, until it collapsed from exhaustion. Then we'd move in for the kill. Velnara felt something cold in her chest. That's horrifying. From the prey's perspective, absolutely. Hyunsik scrolled through more images. Wars, thousands of years of human conflict. We spent our entire evolution learning to hunt, learning to fight, learning to survive on a world that was actively trying to kill us. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, other humans. Earth made us hard. The coalition species evolved differently, Velnara said. Most had time to develop culture and philosophy before they reached the stars. We became civilized. We became civilized too. We have art, music, literature, all of it. But we never forgot how to be predators when we needed to be. Hyunsik met her eyes. Commander, do you know what makes humans dangerous? Your refusal to retreat? Our refusal to forget. Other species moved past their violent origins. They evolved beyond them, genetically or culturally. Humans remember every lesson our ancestors learned. We remember what it's like to be prey. We remember what it's like to be the hunter. And we've decided we're never going to be prey again. Velnara was quiet for a long moment. My species removed fear during our genetic enhancement. We thought it made us better warriors. Did it? We're efficient. We win battles through superior tactics and biology. We almost never panic. She paused. But we also follow doctrine strictly. When casualties reach a certain point, we retreat. It's logical. It's survival, Hyunsik corrected. Nothing wrong with that, but humans have a different calculation. We measure success differently. How? Did we save the people we were trying to save? If yes, then we won. Doesn't matter what it cost us. Velnara thought about Theta 7. 40,000 civilians saved. 5 Marines dead, 9 wounded. By human standards, a complete victory. By coalition standards, barely acceptable. I don't know if I can think that way, she admitted. You don't have to. That's not why we're here. Hyun-sik finished the report and sent it to the admiral. We're not trying to change how the coalition fights. We're just fighting the way we know how. If it helps, great. If not, he shrugged. We'll keep doing it anyway. Velnara stood to leave, but stopped at the door. One more question. That private, Sung-ho, he was laughing during the battle. Why? Hyun-sik smiled. Probably because he was terrified and laughing was better than screaming. Humans have this thing called gallows humor. When things are at their worst, we make jokes. It helps us cope. You joke about death? Constantly. It reminds us we're still alive to make the joke. Hyun-sik pulled up another file, something labeled Human Cultural Overview. Commander, you have quarters on this ship now. Admiral's orders for ongoing integration work. I suggest you use your time to learn about us. Really learn, not just read tactical files. Why? Because you're trying to understand us through logic and military doctrine. That's not going to work. Humans are emotional creatures. Our strength doesn't come from removing feelings. It comes from weaponizing them. After leaving Hyun-sik's quarters, Velnara went to her assigned room. It was small but functional. She sat at the desk and began reading the cultural files. Hours passed. She read about human history, their wars, their art, their philosophies. She read about soldiers who held impossible positions because retreat meant their friends would die. She read about medics who ran into gunfire to save wounded enemies. She read about pilots who crashed their damaged planes into enemy ships to protect their carriers. And slowly, Commander Velnara began to understand. Humans weren't fearless. They were the opposite. They felt fear deeply, intensely, constantly. But somewhere in their violent evolution, they'd learned something the Tahin never had. They'd learned that fear wasn't something to be removed. It was something to be conquered, every single time. I discovered true fear, fighting alongside humans in battle. Part 4. The fortress world of Kelvash burned. Velnara watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as orbital defense platforms exploded one by one. The Vraltiks had brought their entire fleet, hundreds of bioships blotting out the stars. This wasn't a raid or a skirmish. This was an invasion. Fleet Admiral Torvan is ordering a general retreat, Lieutenant Dae-jung reported from his console. All coalition forces are to fall back to Rally Point Gamma. Negative, Captain Hyun-sik said. We hold here. Dae-jung didn't even look surprised. Acknowledged, relaying to the rest of the human fleet. Velnara stepped forward. Captain, the Admiral's orders are clear. Kelvash guards the approach to 12 core systems, but we're outnumbered 4-1. If we stay, we die. If we leave, Kelvash falls. Then those 12 systems fall. Hyun-sik studied the tactical display. How long until coalition reinforcements arrive? 18 hours, Velnara said. Far too long. Then we buy them 18 hours. That's impossible. Hyun-sik smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. Probably. But we're going to try anyway. Dae-jung, open a channel to all human vessels. Combat frequency. The bridge speakers crackled. Velnara could hear voices from dozens of ships, all human, all waiting. This is Captain Park, Hyun-sik said. The coalition is retreating. We're not. Kelvash stands, or humanity's reputation in this war means nothing. All ships engage at will. Show these things what humans do when cornered. A chorus of confirmations came back, voices eager and grim. The human fleet, only 40 ships compared to the coalition's 200, broke formation and charged directly at the Vraltiks armada. Velnara had spent 6 weeks with humans. She'd learned about their culture, their history, their way of thinking, but watching them commit fleet-wide suicide was something else entirely. Captain Hyun-sik, Admiral Torvan's voice came through on a priority channel. You are violating direct orders. Stand down immediately. With respect, Admiral, my orders come from Earth Command, not the Coalition. We'll do this our way. You'll die. Probably, but we'll die buying you 18 hours. Use them well. Yun-Sik cut the channel. He looked at Velnara. Commander, you should take a shuttle back to the Coalition fleet. No point in you dying with us. Velnara's hand moved to her sidearm instinctively, though she had no intention of drawing it. The gesture made Hyun-Sik pause. I'm staying, she said. Why? Because I need to understand. Because I've spent 6 weeks watching your species do impossible things and I still don't know how. Because maybe, just maybe, you're right about fear being something to conquer instead of remove. Because someone needs to witness what happens here, Velnara said aloud, and report it accurately. Hyun-Sik nodded slowly. All right then. Welcome to humanity's last stand. Try not to die. The battle began. The human fleet crashed into the Vraltik's armada like a hammer. Their ships were smaller, fewer, but they fought with tactics the Coalition never used. Ramming maneuvers, suicide runs, boarding actions against bioships that no sane species would attempt. Captain, Lieutenant Yuna called out, the Vraltiks are landing ground forces on Kelvash. The surface defenses are failing. How many civilians still on the planet? Estimated 2 million, most in underground shelters. Hyun-Sik didn't hesitate. Prep all Marines for surface deployment. We're going down. Sir, if we leave the fleet battle, the Vraltiks will destroy us before we reach the surface. Then we go fast. Dae-jung, I need the craziest flight path you've ever flown. Think you can get us planetside alive? The pilot cracked his knuckles. Probably not. But I'll get us down. The Indomitable dove toward Kelvash, engines screaming. Plasma fire filled the space around them. The ship shuddered with each hit. Alarms blaring. Velnara gripped her seat, her enhanced body absorbing the brutal G-forces that would have killed most species. They hit atmosphere at speeds that made the hull glow red. Dae-jung pulled up at the last second, and they skimmed across the surface, leaving a sonic boom in their wake. Landing in 30 seconds, Dae-jung announced, right in the middle of the Vraltik staging area. Perfect, Hyun-Sik said. They landed hard. The moment the ramp dropped, Sergeant Tae-yang led the Marines out into hell. Velnara followed, her rifle ready. They'd touched down in what used to be a city plaza. Now it was a war zone, with Vraltik's warriors swarming everywhere. The Marines formed up and pushed forward, firing constantly. Their objective was simple: reach the underground shelter entrances and hold them until evacuation ships arrived. If evacuation ships arrived. Velnara fought alongside Corporal Ji-hai, whose broken arm had healed enough to hold a weapon. They moved through ruined buildings, killing Vraltiks at every corner. The enemy kept coming, endless waves of chittering nightmares. "Commander, left side!" Ji-hai shouted. Velnara spun and fired, but too slow. A Vraltik's warrior, larger than the others, smashed into her. They crashed through a wall into a dark room. The creature's weight pinned her down. Its mandibles opened, dripping with acid, descending toward her face. For the first time in her 40 years of life, Commander Velnara felt fear. Real fear. Not concern or caution or tactical awareness. Pure, primal terror. Her enhanced body froze, muscles locked, unable to move. This was death. She was going to die. Every cell in her body screamed it. Then Ji-hai appeared, crashing into the Vraltiks from the side. The human was half the creature's size, her armor cracked, her face bleeding. But she fought anyway, slamming her rifle into the warrior's head again and again. "Get up!" Ji-hai screamed at Velnara. "Get up and fight!" The Vraltiks threw Ji-hai across the room. She hit the wall hard and slumped down, not moving. The creature turned back to Velnara. Something snapped inside her. The fear was still there, overwhelming and absolute. But beneath it, burning through it, was something else. Rage. Not at the Vraltiks, but at herself, for freezing, for being weak, for being about to die while a human half her size had charged a monster to save her. Velnara screamed, a sound she'd never made before, and drove her combat knife up through the Vraltix's throat. The blade scraped against chitin, then broke through. Green blood sprayed across her face. The creature thrashed, but she held on, driving the knife deeper until it finally stopped moving. She crawled to Jihi. The human was breathing, barely. Blood ran from her mouth. "Medic!" Velnara shouted into her comm. "I need a medic!" "Busy!" came Hana's voice, strained and distant. "Casualty rates are at 60%. Hold position." Velnara picked up Jihi, surprised by how light the human felt. She carried her back toward the marine lines, firing her rifle one-handed at any Vraltix that got close. The fear was still there, still making her hands shake, but she moved anyway. She found Sergeant Tae Yang holding a choke point with 5 other Marines. They'd made it to the shelter entrance, a massive door leading underground. Vraltix bodies were piled around them. "Corporal Song needs medical attention," Velnara said, laying Jihi down. Tae Yang glanced at the human, then back at the approaching enemy. "She'll get it when we're done here. Can you fight?" Velnara's whole body was shaking. The fear hadn't gone away. If anything, it was stronger now, having tasted what dying felt like. But she checked her rifle, found it still had ammunition, and nodded. "I can fight." "Good, because here they come." The Vraltix charged. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, a living tide of claws and mandibles and hunger. The Marines opened fire, cutting down the front ranks. But more came, always more. Private Sung Ho fell, his chest torn open. He kept shooting until his weapon clicked empty, then died with his finger still pulling the trigger. Lieutenant Yuna appeared with reinforcements, 20 more Marines. They added their fire to the defense. "Evacuation ships incoming!" someone shouted. "ETA, 12 minutes!" 12 minutes. Velnara counted down each second. Her rifle overheated and she switched to her sidearm. That ran dry and she picked up a weapon from a fallen Marine. The Vraltix pushed closer. 10 meters. 5 meters. Tae Yang pulled out a grenade, armed it, and threw it into the mass of enemies. The explosion bought them 30 seconds. "Is this it?" Velnara shouted over the gunfire. "Is this how humans always fight?" "Pretty much," Tae Yang shouted back, laughing despite the blood running down his face. "Welcome to the human race, Commander! We're all crazy here!" The evacuation ships arrived, massive transport vessels that landed right in the plaza. Their doors opened and civilians poured out of the underground shelters, running for safety. The Marines held the line, dying one by one to buy seconds. Velnara's weapon clicked empty. She drew her knife. A Vraltix came at her and she met it head-on, fear and fury mixed together, learning what humans knew from birth. Sometimes you fight because you're brave, sometimes you fight because you're terrified, and sometimes there's no difference at all. I discovered true fear fighting alongside humans in battle. Part 5. 6 months after Kelvash, Commander Velnara stood in a training facility that hadn't existed before the war. The sign above the entrance read, Coalition Human Integration Center, in 12 different languages. Inside, soldiers from 6 different species practiced tactics that would have been considered insane a year ago. "Again!" Velnara shouted to a squad of Taheen warriors. "You're pinned down with 30% casualties. Standard doctrine says retreat, but there are civilians behind you. What do you do?" The squad leader, a young male named Korth, hesitated. His genetic conditioning screamed at him to fall back, preserve forces, fight another day. But he'd spent 3 months training with humans. "We hold," Korth said finally. "We hold until the civilians are safe or we're all dead." "Correct. Now show me." The training exercise began. Holographic Vraltix warriors swarmed the position. The Taheen squad fought back. And for the first time in their lives, they didn't retreat when their casualty counter hit 15%. They held at 20%, at 25%, at 30%. The exercise ended with the squad down to half strength, but the civilians saved. Korth looked shaken, his hardened skin plates pale. "That felt wrong," he said to Velnara. "Every instinct told me to retreat." "I know," Velnara said, "because our instincts were designed for survival, not victory. Humans taught me the difference." She moved through the facility, observing other exercises. Kreth soldiers practicing aggressive charges instead of tactical withdrawals. Saltine gunners learning to provide covering fire for advancing troops instead of maximizing their own survival. Species that had never known fear, learning to act as if they did. The Coalition Council had promoted Velnara to Chief of Human Integration after Kelvash. Her mission was simple: teach other species what humans knew instinctively, not tactics or weapons, but mindset. The will to fight beyond reason, beyond survival instinct, beyond fear itself. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done. "Commander," a voice called. Lieutenant Yuna approached, now a training instructor. She'd survived Kelvash with burns across 40% of her body. The scars remained, but she wore them like medals. "The Admiral wants to see you. Something about the final offensive." Velnara followed Yuna to the command center. Inside, Fleet Admiral Torvan stood with Captain Hyun Sik, now promoted to Admiral himself. A holographic star map floated between them, showing the Vraltik's home cluster. "Commander," Torvan greeted her. His mandibles clicked in what she'd learned was respect. "We're ready. 3 coalition fleets, fully integrated with human tactical doctrine. The Vraltik's homeworld is within reach." Velnara studied the map. The Vraltiks had been pushed back system by system over the past 6 months. Every time they expected coalition forces to retreat, those forces held. Every time they surrounded a position, soldiers fought through the encirclement. Human influence had changed how the entire coalition fought. "What's our role?" she asked. "You'll command the 3rd Fleet," Torvan said. "Mixed species, with human advisors. Your objective is the Vraltik's breeding world. Destroy it, and we break their ability to replace losses." "Expected casualty rate?" Torvan's expression was grim. "High, possibly catastrophic, but necessary." 6 months ago, Velnara would have protested. Now she simply nodded. "When do we deploy?" 48 hours. Use them well." Velnara spent those hours checking equipment, briefing officers, and preparing her fleet. The night before deployment, she found herself in the memorial garden that had been built outside the training center. The garden was quiet, peaceful. Trees from a dozen worlds grew around a central monument. On that monument, carved in stone that would last 1,000 years, were names, human names. Marines who died at Theta 7, pilots who crashed their ships into Vraltik's carriers at Kelvash, soldiers who held impossible positions so others could live. Private Bae Sung-ho. His name was there, along with dozens of others. "They saved us," a voice said behind her. Velnara turned. Admiral Hyun-sik stood at the garden entrance, his hands in his pockets. He looked older than when they'd first met, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Yes," Velnara agreed. "They did." Hyun-sik walked to the monument and touched one of the names. Sung-ho was 23. He wanted to be a teacher after the war. Used to carry books in his pack, reading between battles. "I remember him laughing during a firefight once. I thought he was insane." "He was terrified. They all were, but they fought anyway." Hyun-sik looked at her. "You understand now, don't you? What makes humans fight the way we do?" Velnara was quiet for a moment, thinking about Kelvash, about freezing in terror when the Vraltiks pinned her down, about the shame of it and the rage that came after, about carrying Corporal G high while her hands shook with fear. "I understand that fear isn't weakness," she said. "It's proof that what we're fighting for matters. If we felt nothing, we'd have nothing to lose. But because we feel everything, every battle means something. My people knew that from the beginning. Yours had to learn it. And now we'll teach it to the Vraltiks. The final offensive began 2 days later. 3 coalition fleets dropped out of slip space in the Vraltiks' home cluster. The enemy was waiting, their entire remaining armada defending their breeding world. Velnara stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Determined, surrounded by officers from 4 different species. Her second-in-command was Lieutenant Song Ji-hai, now fully recovered from Kelvash and promoted for her actions there. "All ships report ready," Ji-hai said. "Awaiting your orders, Commander." Velnara looked at the tactical display. The Vraltiks outnumbered them 2 to 1. In the old days, she would have calculated acceptable losses, planned retreat paths, considered strategic alternatives. Now she simply opened a fleet-wide channel. "All vessels, this is Commander Velnara. The Vraltiks have burned our worlds, killed our civilians, and waged a war of extinction against the Coalition. Today, we end that war. Not by retreating when things get hard, not by accepting calculated losses. We end it by fighting with everything we have, the way humans taught us. For every world they destroyed, for every life they took, for every soldier who died buying us this moment." She paused, feeling the old fear creep up her spine. 6 months ago, she would have suppressed it. Now she let it fuel her. "We fight until they surrender, or until they're extinct. All ships, attack formation. Show them what happens when you teach the galaxy to fight like humans." The fleet charged forward. The battle lasted 8 hours. Velnara's flagship took heavy damage, but she refused to retreat. When the bridge lost atmosphere, they sealed their helmets and kept fighting. When weapon systems failed, they rammed Vraltiks' bioships. When all seemed lost, they fought harder. The Coalition's 3rd Fleet lost 60% of its ships, but the Vraltiks' breeding world burned. 3 months later, the war ended. The Vraltiks, their ability to reproduce destroyed, their fleet scattered, sued for peace. The Coalition accepted. Velnara stood once again in the memorial garden, this time with Admiral Hyunsik and hundreds of others. New names had been added to the monument, Taheen names now, and Kreth names and Saltine names, species that had learned to fight through fear and paid the price for that lesson. "We lost so many," Velnara said quietly. "Yes," Hyunsik agreed, "but look what we saved." He gestured to the people around them. Survivors from Theta 7, civilians from Kelvash, children from a dozen worlds that would have been destroyed if the Coalition had kept fighting the old way. They were alive because soldiers had learned to fight like humans, to push through fear instead of running from it. "I'm writing a paper," Velnara said, "about what I learned during the war. The Council wants it distributed to every military academy in Coalition space." "What's it called?" "On the Nature of Human Courage." She looked at Hyunsik. "I'm dedicating it to your people, to the Marines who died so we could learn." "They'd be honored. What's the main thesis?" Velnara smiled, something she'd learned to do from watching humans. "That fear isn't the enemy. Fear is proof that what we're fighting for matters. The bravest warriors aren't those who feel nothing. They're those who feel everything and fight anyway." Hyunsik nodded slowly. "Sounds about right." They stood together in the garden as the sun set, casting long shadows across the monument. 2 species, once strangers, now bound by shared sacrifice and hard-won understanding. Velnara had discovered true fear fighting alongside humans in battle. But she'd also discovered something more important. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was fear transformed into purpose, into will, into the determination to protect what mattered no matter the cost. The humans had known this all along, learned it through thousands of years of fighting on a world that tried to kill them. Now the rest of the galaxy knew it too, and the universe would never be quite the same.